Hi, wonderful, wonderful netizens watching us today in another show of Entrepreneurship Unplugged. It's my delight to have Devendra Naik, who happens to be a very playful friend of mine, and his story is very interesting. You get to unplug him over the course of the next few moments. But I want to talk about this amazing entrepreneur who became an entrepreneur by escaping. So a lot of entrepreneurs have a lot of stories why they became entrepreneur, right? But this is an entrepreneur who escaped from employment, and that's how he became an entrepreneur. Hi Devendra, how are you?
Very good.
I can go to call you Deva or Dev or Devendra. What do you resonate with?
I think Dave is good.
Good. Okay. Dev is good. So let's hear from the Dev as to how did he escape and why would he escape?
Well, I think I was just young and foolish. I was 21 years old when I got into this IT company, through campus placements after my engineering. Never really did much engineering in college, but that was a time when placements were booming in these IT companies, and I got into it. But I realized that, I don't want to do it. Of course, many things contributed to that.
And you realized it within the first 7 days, is that so?
Absolutely. Just 1 week. And I saw one of my friends who was working there in the same company, and I asked him what he's doing. And his answer was enough to tip me over that this is definitely not something that I want to do. The fact that the office was like 2.5 hours away from my house also might have contributed to that. But, I think so I worked in a company for 7 days. And then
that's your employment resume? 7 days. So here is somebody who found a solution to his problem very early, right? He didn't really have that problem pan out. He decided the problem will pan out in this manner and solved it even before the problem could breathe its head out. Am I correct? And that's also made him found P2S, problem to solution. And today's Entrepreneurship Unplugged, as me gets into this, I'm sure this P2S of problem to solution soon in this show would become play to solutions. So let's hear the journey of problem to solution to play to solution, and that's a secret part. Let's hear how did P2S do. You did website development, you did technology, you were a solution to all problems, or was it only IT?
Yeah, like I said, the only thought was to do something on my own. And I think this was 20 years ago when possibly startups were not as accepted or as glamorous as they are today.
Right.
So it was basically a do anything company, which basically is that we go to someone and whatever they ask me to do.
Did somebody ask you to go down into the seabed and get the pearls?
Yes, absolutely. I think I would have done that.
Right.
I think, like I said, I was young and foolish. But I think, that led to fantastic experiences because I got a direct. I don't know. I didn't realize it at that time, but now I reflect. I met so many business people, entrepreneurs, corporate leaders who, were just interacting maybe with that 21-year-old. Sometimes they didn't care. They were not really. They may not have thought I was very serious.
They were not on their guard.
They were not on their guard. But I think I got a much richer picture of the world than what I imagined in my
office
desk or my engineering college. So that cocoon really burst very, very quickly. Some of the stories, really is something that we laugh about.
Want to narrate one of them?
One of them, for example, we got a call, this was maybe a few months into when we had started, and we got a call from this gentleman saying that he wants to create a website. And we're like, okay. And he said he's like an expert stock analyst, alright. And this was completely new to me, I had no connection to the world of shares and stocks. So I said, okay, we can do that. He asked us some questions, and then he said, okay, come, my office is in Baikala, and come and meet me, and let's see how we can do. And the first thing I felt was, wow, just talking to that gentleman on phone, I could almost feel his confidence, And I was imagining him, sitting in this big office in this big cabin, and so many people working on his command, of his floor, managing crores of money. And like, wow, So this looks like a good opportunity, and I think I would like to work with such an organization. And so, for example, someone who has an office in South Mumbai, I've never even never gone to South Mumbai from for any work, apart from just roaming around
at the sea,
right at the sea.
Yeah.
So, but when I reached that office, and to cut it short, the office was one chair and one table.
It's ended as it started.
Yeah, one chair and one table in the corridor of a chawl. All right. But after I got over that initial shock, I think I got into this. But even with that, this gentleman has carrying that confidence, that vision into whatever he wants to do. I think that broke one of the barriers that I myself had in my mind as to what I could do. What resources I have and what kind of a business I could run. I think that broke something because I had some inhibitions possibly at that time about, and well, we did do that project with him, and it was a very interesting. His requirements were very, very eccentric and unique. We did it, but more than that project, I think this learning, I think, is something that I don't think I can get from any book or any course. It is just
hardcore rubbing off its inspiration by another entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Really rubs off.
Absolutely.
Invaluable.
Absolutely. I think another big thing is when we started, after a year when we decided, okay, we had some enough work, we started hiring people. Okay. Now a 22-year-old guy, sitting in a small, room, a temporary office, hiring, again, that also was a learning experience because, are people taking you seriously? So many people I got to see, they're so, while I had left my job like at the drop of a hat, but for so many people, it was, that employment meant so much. I think that experience, also.
They will actually give a life-changing moment for some fellow human being.
Absolutely.
Was also struck you at 22.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that thing that, okay, I'm not only running my business because someone told me, that what you can do is create jobs. Earlier I had, actually before interviewing people, it was just a phrase that, sounded nice. That, I'm creating jobs. But when I actually, sit across from that person, or when that, a young girl whom we hired, when we talked to her mother, who was very happy that now she is able to earn, that feeling was
sublime.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was looking at him. He's just at age 20, he escaped into entrepreneurship, and you just reached age 22. And I feel you've lived an entire life in those 2 years.
Absolutely.
I've heard of in my experiences across both on camera and off camera. As we unplug you seem to be unplugging almost every year of entrepreneurship route. For example, I've heard of stories when somebody gets inspired and then become an entrepreneur, gets bombed, and then they become an entrepreneur. But here is somebody who's become an entrepreneur by escaping, and you actually seem to be a destiny's child, whether it's the entrepreneur who inspired you at Baikula, or whether it's the mother who wept because the child got a job, or whether you were given employment to somebody. It seems to be that the entire landscape or the entrepreneurship was built for you to keep exploring. Has entrepreneurship for you been an exploration? Has it been something that you thought this is the way it will go, or has it been, as you solve problems of the website and so many other problems, has it been that entrepreneurship has given you separate different doorways and you've been taking it and moving on. Has it been a revelation of sorts about your own persona?
Absolutely. I don't think it has been, no, at least in the first few years were definitely not planned. It was an exploration. Actually, it was an exploration both literally and figuratively. Literally because I remember with a couple of my friends, when business had dried up, we said, okay, let's go out and try to get some business. And we didn't know how to do it. Till then it had come through some referrals or family friend. So I remember we went on this street, this huge shopping street in Malad, and we were just knocking doors. And we had no idea how to sell. They had no idea why they would need anything that we were offering. But we were just going and knocking, and I remember being totally exhausted.
You did it like several hours?
Several hours, totally exhausted. I didn't want to walk another step and didn't want to hear another no, because it was absolutely like that,
No.
It was a no, it was a barrage of no's, possibly traveling in the hot sun. But I think, that exploration, while those 3-4 days that we explored that attached tree didn't give us business. But I think it did, it has, allowed me to hear no a little easily. It's okay. While they didn't give us business, but we still got some insights as to what's happening. What kind of, while for example we are offering websites, what kind of companies some of the bigger brands in the mall are already working with for their websites, So, I think, I didn't connect those dots at that time, but I think,
there is time for our dots to be connected.
Yes.
This is 2007?
This is, I think, 2006 or 2007. Yes.
2 years after college.
Absolutely. But because we were ready to do things, I think a lot of people started asking us, will you do this as well? People offered us, a chance to come on board and as a partner or as a collaborator. And I think at that point of time, we stumbled through it. We made a lot of mistakes. We struggled. But I think it all added up to the experience,
Till you gathered.
that I got.
Where we're going towards in this journey, wonderful listeners and viewers, is the importance of how you can play to conquer entrepreneurial ambitions, and how playing, and in a moment or in a few moments you'll know what playing is all about. But P2S is not about problem to solution, but P2 is about playing to solve or playing to solutioning. We'll come to that, but I want to ask you, Dev, in your family, you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
No, not really. My father is a professional. He is a consulting engineer.
So entrepreneurship is not in the family. So when you went through the no day which you spoke about, and the fact that you were an entrepreneur with escape, at no point did it occur to you, let me now go back to the comfort of a job, because it was IT. It was 2006. And I'm sure 80% of your friends were on an H1 being stamped and going abroad, if they're already not there. Some of them would have got green cards also. Did that not appeal to you to go back to the comfort of a job and leave this, especially the Baikula and the Malad story? Did it appeal? Did it even come to you, or it came and you said, hang on?
No, I think at that point of time it never did. I was having too much fun. While there were struggles, and we were figuring out some, especially after employing people, there comes a time when now you have to think, yes, I have to have money in the bank to pay these people, right? When you're on your own, even if there's a tough month, then, it didn't really, at that point of time, it didn't worry me. But when now we have people, now we have to make sure.
Ownership of what them, caring for them.
Yes. So that was there, and going back to a job, very frankly, was never an option.
Never occurred to you.
Never.
So as you went on, you went into websites, and then since you were all things to all people, the all solver of all problems, but then you got into specifically deep dive into digital and stuff like that. You got into that space. That's where you thought it belonged. So most of the projects were in IT, and that's where you graduated from, right? You
Yes.
graduated from Mumbai University.
by university.
In IT.
As an IT engineer.
You
Never really did much engineering in college.
But why? Something tells me, were you like a college topper?
No,
Or
not at all.
somewhere there?
Not at all.
Something wrong with the teachers, I think.
No. I don't think I was in class very often.
Yeah.
But the college was also a very fantastic experience because while I didn't study engineering in college, I did learn a lot of other things. You know, when you're organizing college events or going into street plays, you know, I think all of those have played a much more important part.
I see. So, of the classroom is where you learned most.
Absolutely.
And street plays you mentioned, and today playing is a quintessential part of you.
Absolutely.
And I feel odd to relate to Dave as somebody who's not into playing. I'm having a tough stance to keep the suspense from the viewers. I'll come to that in a short while. What I want to ask you is, in digital technology, did you do lots of projects? Were application projects? Did you make products? Or was it like in a particular vertical space? Just a quick synopsis of what kind of projects you did.
We started doing a lot of projects, anything that came to us, custom projects. Very interesting. We did a media project which, again, opened up a view into a new industry totally. But at some point of time, we decided that we had to, focus on a few things. And that's when we had built a product around, educational institutes, specifically coaching classes, a system to manage their operations across multiple branches. And so that's one area that we got a lot of traction in those years. We also developed a platform which was our grand idea of democratizing the SMS short code that was there. Making it a platform, making it available to everyone rather than a select few. So we made some progress on that front. Multiple things happened. One of the chief things being that, around 2008-9, when the iPhone, the smartphones, all these mobile apps started coming up on the phones, that entire premise of using an SMS on a short code
So you
became
had
also...
something like a short message exchange, if I can. Is that
Correct.
something you made?
Yeah, it is called a short SMX, a short message exchange, where everyone could, set up their own short code messaging service.
When you say everyone, you mean the organizations like an event organizer, like Indian Idol, or
Event organizer, a tuition teacher,
I see.
anyone could do it on their own.
How did you market? How did you sell it? How did you get your audience or your customers?
So that's the time when we had started to explore this world of digital marketing. It was just about beginning then. Twitter had just popped up. I think Facebook was one of the platform that was there. Facebook had started to come up. So and because it was new, we had to figure it out on our own, which also helped us later. But so we were using that the digital media to take this story out.
I see. So the digital marketing or digital media work was also done by you, or did you outsource?
It was no outsourcing at that time.
So all this, as you said, what you said, the tuition classes, the coaching class, the media thing, the SMS, the SMS exchange, all of that is something which you self-developed and implemented, or how did it evolve? You learned, you did.
We learned, the first time when someone asked me to do a website, I didn't even know how to do that, or someone asked me to do software. So we always used to say yes at that point of time and go back and learn. But over a period of time, we developed expertise. We also developed a team. We understood the capabilities of the technology much more than I had done in college when we really into it. And I like to create like something that comes very naturally to me. And hence, I think all of these ideas came putting different components that we had built for different projects together. That's how I think we came to these ideas and put them into action.
Okay. So typically when you put this across, I get this sense when I'm talking to you, I can see the glee in your eyes, despite your wonderful gold-shaped, gold-rimmed glasses, that you played, you enjoyed this play, if you can use the word play in a very responsible manner, that for you getting into a newer area was like playing, and you played your way to where you reached, when you realized that everything is about learning, exploring, discovering, did that inquisitiveness and curiosity play a role in shaping you when you like look back and you, in retrospect, was playfulness, sweet place in college you mentioned, or the playfulness of discovering, let me do, how can I do a website for a stockbroker with all those complexities of algorithms, or whether it's the coaching class or the SMS exchange. Did playfulness, if you understand what I'm trying to say in the right sense, did it contribute to your success of being an entrepreneur who was always exploring, inquisitive, innovating?
Definitely in retrospect, I think at that point of time, I was not sure whether this is a good thing or bad, because it came naturally. Trying out new things, going for the next thing, exploring. But there is also, I think at that point of time, some input, because now by this time we had now spent maybe 7-8 years in business, and there were challenges because of this thing. What we had built up suddenly it became obsolete and crashed down. There was, possibly a nagging doubt that, is this the right approach? While exploring gives you lots of opportunities to learn, maybe we need to be more focused, So at that kind of time, it was a little shaky. But in retrospect, yes, all those different explorations, I think have helped in where I am today. Whatever experiences I built today, to be able to build those, be able to talk about those, and deliver impact. I think all of those dots are connected.
So you know what, and I'm actually resonating with what Dave said, and I also obviously know him as a friend and as a buddy and as a person, but it's a new Dave that I'm discovering now. Because what's coming to me now, Dave, is that this playfulness to success, P2S is getting multiple dimensions, by the way. Problem to success, play to success, playfulness to success, and all of that. I think, is this when you decided that so much of experimentation that you've been doing, and you try it in real life, because it's hardcore business, it's ups and downs of business, ups and downs of customer expectations, ups and downs of managing the commitments to as customers and the clients. Did this somewhere tell you that why is it not important? Why is it so important? Why is it so imperative to kind of simulate environments so that an entrepreneur who's taking a journey can at least know how much is possible or not possible if you simulate an environment before you actually practice it? Did simulation, because what I'm coming to next is his setting up of Boredom. So when I say Boredom, I mean Boardom, the kingdom of boards. That's when he set up the kingdom of boards, and we decided that his hobby and his passion pre-COVID, when he became a father, right, is when he decided that it's time for me to take a break, look at the games that I'm playing, and created Boredom or board games. And the fact that you wanted to simulate, and the fact that you had a passion and hobby of having boards to play, the only board game that I know is Snakes and Ladders and Lido. I'm sure you're talking much more than that, right? So we'd like to hear about the board games that you've got. You must be having like 5, 10, 20 board games?
100, right?
100, we are a century, okay? I never knew 100 board games existed, by the way, in the world. So this aspect of simulation and board games, did it come together like one of those brainwave moments in this game? Did it happen that way, or?
Well, like you said, I always liked playing games, but I only knew about the Ludo or the Monopoly earlier.
Yeah.
But somewhere, in 2012-13, I was introduced to this world of modern board games. Okay, one of the first games that I remember is this game called Viticulture. It's a game about making wine.
Oh.
Okay.
Like it's available in India?
It is available. It's a European. I think it's American designer. I'm not sure whether.
Right.
But that game really captured my imagination.
Viticulture.
viticulture.
I see.
The story behind the gameplay was totally different from what I had earlier, experienced during my Monopoly days. Even the components were so beautiful. And that just sucked me in. I started playing more board games. I met, like-minded people who love playing board games. I started collecting board games. And I realized it's an entirely, new world out there. Board games, small, big, a 10-minute game to a 10-hour game. It's all out there, right?
And you will say the board game is like a 10-hour?
Yeah.
Like a chess game, beyond chess?
That's, I think, what I have played.
Yeah.
But, there are some, I have not managed to do that, but there are some people who play a game over months.
I see.
It's a campaign that's run over months.
Okay.
And even there are people who play, across countries.
I see.
They have an online forum in which they decide what move they. So it's
Different world.
a different world altogether. But while doing that, I collected my own board game. It was just fun. I was just enjoying, playing it. And while I was playing, one of the thoughts that built up slowly was seeing people from very different backgrounds, different ages, different work, when they came to play, even people who didn't have this passion for board game, someone whose friend had possibly forced them
To come
into coming and playing.
Yeah.
I saw that, they're fully engaged. People playing a game was one of the few times I noticed they keep their phones aside, or they talk to strangers, or when they finish playing the game, they are discussing about, what could we have done different?
Wow. That's when they're away from themselves, so to say. Yeah?
Absolutely. And I think the game format pulls us out of a little bit of some of our inhibitions, maybe
set patterns.
a set pattern, a fear of being judged. I think the child within us comes outside, and I think like children learn, if we can actually be childlike. Okay, that is one of the thoughts that really drives what I do today.
Okay.
That play can bring out the child inside, which opens us up to a different space of learning. There's also a lot of science, that is something that I've researched after that. This was not planned, but with friends, colleagues. Meetal Salia, a friend, she's a psychologist, she's a game therapist.
She's a author. She authors
She's an
game books.
author,
Yeah.
And so, things that we see from a content point of view, a logical point of view, games allow us to work with psychology, but also, I think, with the neurology of the brain. Because when people play, this is what, research shows, that the hormones that are released allow our brain to absorb and retain that experience much, much better. So it's not only about the content of a program. Play is very, very powerful, by itself. So,
That's how it
I
happens.
see that
So-
happen every day.
Every day. So when you set up your kingdom of boredom and you decided that that will take away boredom, as in BOREDOM, is that why you formed your initiative, your company, your campaign as No More Boredom?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
During the consulting days, I had seen so many people across so many organizations, big, small, private sector, government. And one of the common themes was running in my head, seeing people in it, that there's so much potential here, but it's not used to its fullest. And there was always a feeling that there are some common themes running, people not talking to each other, not communicating, not working together, getting stuck in, some
Silos.
fixed mindsets, silos, how they approach problems. It's a very common set of problems that I noticed. And while I know some fantastic trainers now, my experience of training at that point of time, whatever trainings I had sort of gone through was, oh my God, this is like death by PowerPoint. One slide after the other, and someone bombarding me with information. I was like, training cannot be like this. That's one of the thoughts that was there. And when this clicked that maybe games are the way, I decided that let me try it out, and that's how I said I don't want boredom in trainings anymore. So my company became Nomogo. That's no more boredom in training and team building programs.
So from the experience that you learned in terms of the foray into entrepreneurship, observing playfully, exploring life, entrepreneurship life, observing people at work in different corporate sectors, all that made Nomogo possible. And you just said you became a training company. So is it simulation? Is it training? How do you slot yourself? And you also mentioned about corporates.
Right.
So is it only team building that you do for corporates, or is it that there's a different aspect of simulation and games in the area of HR, learning, development, all of that? Is that the segment that you fit in?
So, like you said, I think business leaders in all organizations, whether they are solopreneurs, SMEs, corporates, large MNCs, business leaders want to achieve results, and they want to solve problems, and they want their people to be more capable of solving problems and going after opportunities that are there.
Right.
So what Nomogo does is we help business leaders to solve problems and unlock their team potential through the power of business simulation games. What that means is these games that I have designed and I continue to design are simulating some aspect of work or business. The behaviors that you mentioned, the experiences that I have, I try to put those behaviors into different situations in these simulations.
Nice.
Because these concepts, I believe, can be best learned when people experience situations without having this fear of crashing or failing. Like pilots would get into a simulator to learn, make the mistakes that they would while learning, without having the risk that comes associated of impact.
Yeah.
So these simulations allow business leaders and their teams to experience, to play through different situations, make mistakes, and learn through those experiences.
Nice.
So the way the programs are designed is they will play a simulation game, and then as a group, through a structured debrief, we facilitate those conversations to bring out what happened in that game, how can we relate it to life, work, and what could we have done differently in the game, and hence, what can we do differently in our work. So that's how these programs work, and it's been 5 years now.
Wow. So it's like during COVID times.
Absolutely.
So you are definitely a COVID warrior. I'm sure you must have done programs during COVID.
Absolutely.
COVID was it a godsend opportunity in that sense?
It was totally godsend for me. It was of course a tragic, unfortunate for so many people.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a big opportunity. When I got into this, when I started Nomogo 1 year before COVID, it was tough. It was a completely new industry for me. When I had to connect to corporate leaders or HR to present this concept, a new concept, it was just difficult to even get that.
How dare you come and play games, right?
Correct.
It's a serious workplace.
Yeah, it's a serious. But I think COVID changed all of that in a flash. I started to get those meetings, those Zoom meetings for 5 minutes,
Right.
which I was able to talk about what this really can enable. I think companies at that time were also looking for something to do with their teams, to engage their teams meaningfully. And because of the past the past experiences in technology and digital, I was able to quickly go virtual with a a couple of my simulation experiences. So we were very fast to deliver those, and that gave us that foot in the door, which has now snowballed into all the referrals and work. Even though a lot of work has now moved away from virtual and in person, I think the COVID time was very, very important for me to,
So you design games on your own, both offline in the real world and on the digital world. The same games scale up to do both, or you have different games for different for both the platforms.
We do games in person and virtual. Most of my simulations are, can be delivered both in person and virtual. There are some which are designed specifically for each of those modes. I have designed them myself as well as now, in the last 2 years, because I've started working with so many expert trainers and training organizations. Those collaborations have allowed me to build more richer experiences, on those subjects in which, these trainers are,
So games are used by other trainers
Absolutely.
to conduct their customized training programs.
Absolutely.
So not only corporates, not only SMEs, but trainers also use your
Absolutely.
programs which you customize for them.
Absolutely. So I started off delivering only to corporates, but I realized that there's a much bigger playground opportunity and a need for this. So I think right now it's almost become, I think it surpassed the workshop that I do myself. I license my programs and train other trainers to use these simulations in their programs.
So there is a trainer doing a particular corporate program. Within that program, your simulation, your gaming can get embedded.
Absolutely.
Oh, I see. So you can really add value to the program, whether it's off-site or in the campus. Any big names, if you're allowed to say, corporates where you feel proud of having engaged their audience into simulation and it's really impacted that company. Any company you want to talk about or mention?
I think several companies. I think the biggest one that I would like to talk about is this collaboration that I have with this fantastic company called Corporate Compass.
I see.
Okay, it's a team building training organization. Earlier we might have been bidding against each other on competitors. But in the last couple of years we have such a fantastic collaboration. We have built together and using one of my simulations, we have been able to reach out to, I think, more than 100 different teams.
I see.
So this is something that, very valued partnership for us. And that's something that, we continue to build upon. So trainers and training organizations are, have been a big part of what we have been able to build in the last 2 years and really take it to that level of excellence based on the inputs that we get from all of these partners and put them back into our experiences, as well as the scale which can be delivered. Because me myself only delivering few programs.
And compared with the
Right now, I think in the last year and a half, I've had 18 trainers who have included these simulations in their programs and been able to deliver to a much bigger audience.
So once they perform, you monitor them as to how it went and you take feedback.
Absolutely, I think it's a two-way process. It's about feedback, it's about insights learned, and a constant, quest to improve.
Right.
So my thought is that I want to take this 18 to 50 in the next in this financial year,
Right.
to really make sure that this power of the simulations can be experienced and can create an impact on a much wider audience.
So for team building is one which you mentioned. For other specific buckets in which you do these simulations, is it team building and is it like, for example, innovation, or is it customized to what a corporate wants or an organization wants?
There are definitely some themes around which the current simulations are built.
Right.
And we customize on top of that when requirements come in, because finally it's not about my simulation going out there, it's about the problem being solved. But common themes that my simulations are built on are collaboration being one. How can teams really come together and use all of their synergies. So collaboration is a big need of the hour as well as in demand. Another one is mindset. How can we create a growth mindset, a mindset of innovation, problem solving,
plenty, abundance.
So so mindset is one of the big themes around which some of my simulations are built.
I see.
And of course, sales is a big area that I've been fortunate to build with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to an amazing
Absolutely.
roadmap ahead
Absolutely.
on the exponential sales playbook. Very making a lot of sense. So I want to look at you raised a collaboration with corporate compass. And I'm going to quickly come to what suddenly dawned on me of this engineer who escaped from his employment. But I want to speak about the importance of networking. Is networking, in your opinion, Dave, an important tool to collaborate? Is networking a must, or is it hoga to hoga, it's okay? Or is it a must for an entrepreneur to get into this? Because in many ways you have said that your growth and an ambitious growth of 18 to 50 trainers, which is in the next 4 or 5 months of this financial year, I think the confidence comes because you feel you can collaborate. Is it founded on an underlying platform of the power of networking that you have been used to? Is networking an important element?
It is definitely one of the most important elements I feel. In fact, in my life, it's been like a switch is flipped in the last 4 years. Before that, I think I was, networking was not a word that, I would think of.
You were communicating, you were not a silent guy, but you didn't network that come that way of with a structure.
Absolutely. But networking in the last 4 years has actually just transformed the way I look at business from all opportunities, and the confidence that it gives me to make sure I can deliver as well. So it's on all sides. I think when I speak about collaboration in my programs, right, the fact of having networked with so many people allows me to talk about it from a first person point of view, a conviction, because I know that it has worked, I know what comes in the way, and have tried to get over that. And it's been fantastic. And I think networking is something that I personally think I have to continue to learn and put into practice more and more. That's an imperative. Absolutely.
Yeah, being a discoverer, I'm sure you will keep discovering like you always does, right, guys? You'll explore. That's been in the DNA. But I think we come to a situation when it dawns on me that the engineer who used to play his time in college, who escaped to entrepreneurship, played games, followed his passion, followed his art, and now if I can institute you officially as a game engineer to make sure that simulation is such an important part of corporate efficiency, of entrepreneurship direction. It is not going to hurt by simulating an environment that you want to choose. And I think here on the show is the official game engineer of India, if not the world, because I'm sure in some edition we'll talk about his global foray. Type 50 is the India mark. I'm sure soon we will go global if you've not already done so. And the important thing is to look at how today gamification, simulation, apart from being no more boredom, apart from not causing boredom, it actually causes meaning to implement. And that's been the learning today, Dave, from the unplugging session that we had today. And it's absolutely, it's like you came alive from age 20 till, I won't disclose your current age, but you came alive playing that path. And in more ways than one, you've done various things. I think it's important to realize that you've actually done what your heart wants you to do, which is to play and make sure that playing to success, making sure that play to solve problems is a real thing. It's no more a hobby to be played at home. It's a real thing out there in the world, and that makes the world a much better place, which all of you will agree. Make sure that you plug onto one of his Follow him, follow Dave. We'll put those links in the comments below. Plug into one of these games that Dave does and make sure that your corporation, your enterprise, your own capability to understand solutions from a gaming perspective comes alive. So wishing you all the very best and meeting you later in another edition of Entrepreneurship Unplugged. Let me wish you well. Let me wish you a gameful farewell.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
To meet you at some other game when we play the playbook.
Thank you so much.